Hello everyone and welcome back to Mrs. B History. Now in our previous videos we've looked at the ideological divide between capitalism and communism. We've explored how the big three tried and ultimately struggled to hold the Grand Alliance together at Tehran and Yalta. Today we're going to look at one of the most dramatic and consequential moments of the entire 20th century, a moment that didn't just end a war but fundamentally changed the nature of international relations forever. We're talking about the atomic bomb. On the 6th of August 1945, the United States of America dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, on the 9th of August, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Within weeks, Japan had surrendered and the Second World War was over. But here's the question your examiner wants you to think about. What did the atomic bomb do to the relationship between the USA and the USSR? Because whilst the bombs were dropped on Japan, their political shockwaves hit the Soviet Union just as hard, and the consequences would shape the Cold War for decades to come. To understand the impact of the bomb, we first need to understand the secret behind it. From 1942 onwards, the United States had been running a top-secret program called the Manhattan Project, a vast scientific and military effort to develop a nuclear weapon before Nazi Germany could do the same. The project involved over 130,000 people working across multiple sites across America. It cost the equivalent of billions of dollars, and it was so secret that even Vice President Harry Truman didn't know about it until he became president in April 1945, following the death of Roosevelt. Now here's the crucial point for your studies. Stalin knew. Not everything, but Soviet spies had successfully infiltrated the Manhattan Project. Agents, including a British-German physicist working on the project, were passing information back to Moscow. So while Truman thought he was keeping the bomb completely secret, Stalin already had a general idea that the Americans were developing a nuclear weapon. This matters enormously, because it means that when Truman tried to use the bomb as a diplomatic tool, Stalin was not nearly as surprised as Truman hoped he would be. Which brings us to the Potsdam Conference, held in July and August 1945, just weeks before the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At Potsdam, Truman told Stalin almost casually that the United States had developed a weapon of unusual destructive force. He didn't call it an atomic bomb. He didn't give any details. It was deliberately vague. Historians believe Truman was using this as a form of diplomatic pressure, a way of signalling American power to Stalin without giving anything away. Some historians go further and argue that the decision to drop the atomic bomb on Japan was partly motivated by a desire to end the Pacific War quickly, before the Soviet Union could advance too far into Asia and claim influence there, just as it had done in Eastern Europe. This idea that the bombs were dropped partly to intimidate the Soviets as much as to defeat Japan is known as atomic diplomacy, and it's an important concept. In response to Truman's hint, Stalin remained completely calm and showed no reaction. He simply said he hoped America would make good use of it. But behind the scenes, Stalin went straight back to his advisors and ordered the Soviet nuclear program to be dramatically accelerated. The arms race had quietly begun, even before the bombs had been dropped. On the 6th of August 1945, the American B-29 bomber Enola Gay dropped a uranium bomb nicknamed Little Boy on Hiroshima. The explosion instantly killed an estimated 60,000 to 80,000 people, and tens of thousands more would die in the weeks and months that followed from radiation sickness and burns. 3 days later, on the 9th of August, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki, killing an estimated 40,000 people instantly, with the total death toll eventually reaching around 80,000 people. The scale of destruction was unlike anything the world had ever seen, an entire city devastated in a single moment. It was a weapon that didn't just kill, it poisoned the land, the air, and the survivors for years to come. On the 15th of August 1945, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender. The Second World War was over. Now we reach the heart of today's video, and to the section that is most directly relevant to your exam. What were the consequences of the atomic bomb for the relations between the USA and the USSR? Let's go through them carefully. Consequence 1 was that there was a massive shift in the balance of power. Before Hiroshima, the Soviet Union had the largest conventional army in the world. The Red Army had driven the Germans back from Stalingrad to Berlin, a military achievement of extraordinary scale. In conventional military terms, Stalin had enormous power. The atomic bomb changed that overnight. Suddenly, the United States possessed a weapon that could destroy a city in seconds. No conventional army, however large, could defend against this. The USA's nuclear monopoly, the fact that only America had the bomb, created a massive and deeply alarming imbalance of power, and Stalin felt this acutely. The USSR had sacrificed more than any other nation to win the war. Around 27 million Soviet citizens had died, and now the country they had fought alongside, America, had a weapon that made all of that sacrifice feel precarious. For Stalin, the atomic bomb was not just a military threat, it was a humiliation. Another consequence was Soviet suspicion and mistrust. The fact that the USA had developed and used the atomic bomb without telling the Soviet Union deepened Stalin's suspicions about American intentions enormously. Remember, at this point, the Grand Alliance was technically still in place. The USA and USSR were supposed to be partners, but here was America developing the most powerful weapon in history in total secrecy and then using it without any consultation with its allies. To Stalin, this looked like exactly the kind of aggressive, imperialist behavior that communist ideology said capitalism was capable of. It confirmed his belief that the West could never truly be trusted. This breach of trust was one of the key factors that increased tension and accelerated the breakdown of the Grand Alliance. Consequence 3 was the Soviet nuclear program, meaning the arms race had begun. Stalin's response was immediate and determined. The Soviet Union would develop its own atomic bomb as quickly as possible. He placed the brilliant and ruthless Beria, head of the Soviet secret police, in charge of the nuclear weapon program. The Soviets threw vast resources at the project, and they also benefited from intelligence gathered by their spies inside the Manhattan Project. The result was faster than most Western observers expected. In August 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb, codenamed Joe 1 by Western intelligence. The American nuclear monopoly was over. The reaction in Washington was one of shock and alarm. The USA had assumed it would have been years, perhaps a decade before the Soviets caught up. It had taken less than 4. This Soviet success triggered a new and terrifying phase of the Cold War, the arms race, a competition between the superpowers to develop ever more powerful and numerous nuclear weapons. By the 1950s, both sides were developing hydrogen bombs, weapons hundreds of times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Japan. The world had entered the nuclear age, and it would never feel entirely safe again. A fourth consequence was mutual assured destruction, also called MAD. As both superpowers built up their nuclear arsenals, a grim logic began to take hold that would define the Cold War for decades. If either side launched a nuclear attack, the other would retaliate, and both sides would be destroyed. There would be no winners, no survivors, just catastrophic, civilization-ending destruction. This idea became known as mutual assured destruction, or appropriately, MAD. However, MAD actually made the Cold War more stable in some ways, because both sides knew that a nuclear war would mean their own destruction. They were deterred from ever actually using nuclear weapons directly against each other. The superpowers never fought each other directly. Instead, they fought through proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam and elsewhere, and engaged in political, economic and ideological competition. But the constant threat, the knowledge that humanity could be destroyed at any moment by weapons that already existed, created a permanent state of fear and tension that defined life throughout the Cold War era. A fifth consequence was nuclear proliferation. The atomic bomb didn't just affect US-Soviet relations, it changed the entire landscape of international power. Other nations watched and drew their own conclusions. If you wanted to be taken seriously as a great power in the modern world, you needed nuclear weapons. Britain tested its first atomic bomb in 1952. France followed in 1960 and China in 1964. And so the nuclear club grew, a process known as nuclear proliferation. Each new member adding another layer of danger to an already volatile world. The atomic bomb had, in a very real sense, made the old world obsolete. The rules of international relations, the calculations of war and peace, strength and weakness, had to be entirely rewritten. And it was the USA's decision to use that weapon in August 1945 that set this terrifying new world in motion. And that brings us to the end of today's video on the atomic bomb and its impact on East-West relations. This is one of those topics where the history genuinely matters, because understanding how the world arrived at the nuclear age helps us to understand the tensions that still shape international relations today. If this video helped, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Mrs. B History, and drop any questions in the comments. Good luck with your revision.